Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza, and you're watching or listening to Answers Network. Every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring on special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases, entertain, while bringing answers and options to making our lives happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, if you can't listen live, know that all of our shows can be found at answers.network. I'd also appreciate if you could all do me a big favor. Please forward one of our shows to your social media group and to someone you know who can benefit from a particular subject. This is one powerful way that we can make a positive influence in the world together. And I'll tell you right now, today's show is something that we can all benefit from. Because our guest today shares her healing journey from eating and drinking her feelings to hiking her feelings. When she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes while grappling with grief and unresolved trauma, she set out on a quest to turn her pain into power. Now, 2 hikes across Catalina Island and 80 miles later, Sydney Williams learned to disconnect from distractions and reconnect with herself, all through the power of nature. Now, she's encouraging others to get outside and blaze their own trail to self-love, turning buried traumas into healthy coping mechanisms. Now, with affirmations, prompts, and reflection exercises throughout her new book, Hiking Your Feelings, Sydney offers a toolkit to unpack your trauma pack and set into the best version of yourself. Now, Sydney is now the founder of Hiking My Feelings, a nonprofit organization dedicated to healing powers of nature. Now, her 15-year and counting journey in communications has run the gamut from launching Oscar Mayer's social media channels and working with Fortune 500 brands to educating the public about the importance of easy for me to say, stewardship and equitable access to recreational opportunities. She is also a certified wilderness first responder and has been nominated for the Woman of the Year Award by San Diego Magazine. Sydney, welcome to Answers Network.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it is my pleasure. I have enjoyed learning more about you. I've enjoyed being able to go through your book. And in my introduction, I mentioned, your 80-mile hike. And, I think about the things that I do when I'm feeling stressed and things like that. But what did you think was going to happen during that journey?
Well, to be fair, the 80 miles was split across my 2 hikes across Catalina Island. So it wasn't 80 miles in one shot for my first time. I'm not that hardcore. But honestly, I didn't know what I thought would happen. I just knew the first hike in that series that just radically transformed my life was in December 2016 between Christmas and New Year's. And at the time, I was probably, 60, 70 pounds heavier than I am today. I did not train. I had just been through like 2 of the hardest years of my life, stacked on top of a difficult section of life coming before that. And I just needed to get somewhere off the grid, away from technology, away from the world, and just walk. And I deeply, deeply underestimated how much training I should have done that I did not do until I got on the trail and I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. But from an emotional perspective too, on that second hike in 2018, once I had done the hike in 2016 and I didn't complete it because I was out of shape, the weather was terrible. I have a list of excuses a mile long. When I went back to Catalina in 2018 for my second attempt at the trail, emotionally, it was just, if I had tried to predict that, I wouldn't have been able to. And if you had told me, hey, between these 2 hikes, the first one, you won't even recognize the body you live in. And the second one, you have no idea what kind of stuff is swirling around in your brain that you need to get rid of. I probably never would have set foot on the trail, if I'm being honest. Like if I had a road map if I had a hiking map for the journey I've been on, I don't know that I would have willingly signed up for this, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned about as far as the weight loss, and one of the one of the questions that came in, and again, I want to thank those that take the time to send in questions. And this one actually came in last night. So it said, can you make sure and speak about the physical health benefits of walking in nature? I'm 47 years old, and I started walking in nature about 3 years ago, and I've lost 35 pounds. And my doctor says that my heart has not been in this good a shape for about 15 years. And this is from Kevin in Cleveland, Ohio.
Kevin in Cleveland, thank you. That's such a good question. And honestly, when I first set out on the journeys that I've been on, I wasn't specifically going out there with any intention of losing weight or getting in better shape. Like I just needed some time for myself and disconnect from the distractions of everyday life and the hyper connected world we're living in. And to be completely honest, even when I was in this experience and having it, I didn't have language to articulate the benefits that I was experiencing because I didn't grow up in a community where people found healing in nature. I know I'm certainly not the first, and I hope I'm not the last. Humans have been healing in nature since time immemorial, but I didn't even know how to describe it. I knew how it felt and I understood what was happening, but the how was so foreign to me. Now I know, and I started hiking more after that first trip in 2016 when I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2017. And at the recommendation of my doctor, they suggested walking at least 15 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week. And so I was like, well, I can walk for longer. I can go further. So I'll just do that. And so it really, and like, I also want to say for anybody listening, when we hear the word hiking, right? Like we have this vision and you're like, you need a backpack and really sturdy shoes and all this equipment to be able to go and have an expedition in the wilderness. Nah, man. Like hiking for me, like in our programs, we don't give a definition of what hiking is other than this one, the intent behind the motion. Like there is urban hiking is a thing. My husband and I, for diabetes awareness in 2021, we hiked around the city of Chicago, 220 miles. That's not remote wilderness. That's nearby nature. And that's
Yeah.
existing pedestrian walkways, the Cook County Forest Preserves. We walked across the state of Michigan, same thing, an old railway system that was converted into a multi-use trail. So when I say hiking, it doesn't have to be rugged remote wilderness. It can start with something that's nearby, like your neighborhood. You could just go sit under a tree in your yard or at a local park. You don't have to have access to state parks or national parks or just rugged remote wilderness that is so prevalent out here in the Western US. You don't have to have access to that to be able to do this. But one of the most important things for me is advocating for people to have access to that. So the benefits are the benefits of hiking are the same as benefits of walking. Specifically, if you're able to get disconnected from devices, and it's
Mhm.
more beneficial to me, and I'm not a scientist, nor am I a doctor, so take all that with a grain of salt, but like for my lived experience and what we know to be true, versus like any attempt that I've done to try to get into shape or to find fitness in some capacity has always been indoors, punishing myself on a treadmill. There's not a lot that's healing about going to a gym in my perspective. Like the fluorescent lights, not as great as natural sunlight. The
Mhm.
sterile environment, not as great as fresh air. The people grunting and dropping weights and like making a lot of noise, nowhere comparable to bird song and the crunchy trail under my feet. So I think when we talk about the health benefits of hiking, it's important to think about them in the context of spending time outside, but also finding something that works for us and layering up from there and laddering up from there. Because I started with walks around my neighborhood. Well, first of all, I went out for the big journey in 2016 with no training. Would not recommend that path to
Mhm.
anybody unless you like challenging yourself. And then I started with walks around my neighborhood. And as the walks around my neighborhood got to be too easy, air quotes if you're listening, and air quotes you can see them if you're watching,
Yeah.
those hot walks as they got to be easier, then I started looking, okay, like what are the local trails around me? How do I learn more about the hiking opportunities that are accessible to me here in San Diego? And that's where I started to like graduate into what I now do, which is multi-day, long distance backpacking trips. But you can start with just walking around your cul-de-sac in your neighborhood or your apartment complex or whatever. It doesn't have to be some big adventure.
Well, I love that, and when I for those that are watching, when I smiled at one point, it was the sentence that you said was, my doctor said that I should walk for 15 minutes a day. And you said, and I realized I could do more. So you tried to do 40 miles. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Why not? You said 15 minutes. How about multiple days on end? That sounds great.
There you go. I like that. One of the things, one of the blessings that I've had in my life is one of my businesses that my son is now running and doing a much better job than I did, was working with at-risk youth. And so I spent much of my younger years working with at-risk youth. And many of the programs that I worked with were set up in nature. And the biggest difference in a lot of these kids' lives was the fact that they were coming out of a situation where they had gotten in trouble for whatever their situation was. But so as a young detective, I was taking them to a place. And what I realized when I would get there is, first of all, it was out in the middle of nowhere. But the second part was that all of a sudden it was a much calmer environment. And when I would go over what's the agenda here of what these kids are going through, and much of it was, yes, they would go through therapy, and yes, if it was a drug rehab program, that they would deal with some of those issues, but they'd also just go for hikes and come back and talk about their feelings. So, if you think about it, I mean, this is very similar to what it is that you're doing right now. What's your thoughts on this with starting our kids younger?
Oh, I love all of this from this perspective for the sheer fact that if nothing else, if we're thinking about how we can integrate this into our family environment and how we can introduce our kids to the healing power of nature and all of the benefits of spending time outdoors, I think coming into it from a communication perspective is one of the most profound ways to start to move through this with your children. In that when we're hiking, whether we're walking side by side or if we're walking in front or in back of each other, we don't have to worry about expending the energy to scan facial expressions or body language. We don't have to worry about how intimidating it can feel to maintain eye contact when you have done something that you don't feel proud of, or you're recovering from something that was really difficult. Like, we carry a lot of shame as a society, and sometimes it's hard to look somebody in the eye and talk about the things that are hard. So by the sheer mechanics of how spending time on a trail works, like, we're not walking one person walking forward and one person walking backward, right? Like, we're usually not even looking at each other. So that breaks down the defensiveness that we can feel, that breaks down our sense of like self-protection, and it opens up a channel for conversation. And I think also the thing that really struck me as profound when it comes to like the tools that I use to heal and how hiking made the difference, I have tried. So when I grew up in a really tight knit Midwestern household. We were super close. We told each other everything. And I would walk on eggshells because my dad had an explosive temper. I don't know
Mm.
what he's been through. I still don't know to this day if there's some kind of diagnosis there, but I learned really early how to manage adults' feelings.
Yeah.
So over the course of my life trying to heal from that, I tried meditation, I tried journaling exercises, I tried everything that I could in the absence of access to traditional talk therapy. When I had access, I was terrified of it and I didn't want to do it. And when I was ready for it, I couldn't afford it. So I collected all these different tools to help me find healthy coping mechanisms. But what would happen was I'd be in a seated meditation, for example, and I would be activated by some kind of trauma that my
Mhm.
body has endured. My
Okay.
body would go into fight or flight, and I would just physically shut down, and I would never return to what I was trying to heal from because I couldn't get past the physical reaction to remembering the thing that I'm trying to heal from. And it was with hiking where I realized, oh my gosh, like, I'm deploying all these tools and I'm actually getting to the other side of the physical response because I have somewhere to put that energy. So for kids that are fidgety, or kids being kids, I mean, like, not even like
Yeah.
a diagnosable thing, but kids just being kids with excess energy, to be able to have these conversations without eye contact, without having to scan body, but also in motion, then you have somewhere to put the discomfort when you're bringing up these difficult topics. And I think for whether that's at-risk youth or our own children or just as adults and friends. Like we have been through so much. And I think the through line in everybody's story on this planet is that we all have trauma. And we can pretend like we don't, but that doesn't really serve us. So the second that we realize, yes, we all carry trauma and no, it's not a competition, we can start to look at our shared experience of being through something. And like the worst day of my life, Alan, is very different from the worst day of your life. I already know that to be true, but we're both still here and we can both still talk about it.
Yep.
So through the power of shared story, doing this in motion and also not having to like regulate ourselves or the people that we're with and like constantly scanning, which for children from traumatic upbringings is a thing, then we take off a lot of the pressure and we can move through these conversations in a much more sustainable, healthy, and regulated way.
Well, Sydney, I am so glad that you brought this up, and especially the eye contact part. Now, for everybody out there, you heard Sydney say, I'm not a doctor. So for those of you that like to have things that are reinforced a little bit more, so I'm going to tell you about a doctor, a psychiatrist that worked with many of the families that where we were transporting their young person to a program to get some help. And the doctor would do the aftercare with the family. And he talked to the parents and he would say, one of the best things that you can do to stay in contact with your teen is to go for a walk somewhere and talk to them. And again, and mention, and it's funny, you brought this up. I haven't thought about the eye contact part in years until you just brought it up. But what this doctor said was almost verbatim what it is that you've said, and added, because you have parents that'll say, yeah, but I don't have time for this and stuff. He added, and he said, you know what? He goes, when you're driving them to school in the car, you're still all looking forward. So then do it then. If you can't get out and do it, he was saying, first choice, go out, go for a walk, quiet place and stuff. But if you can't, still utilize that lack of eye contact part to be able to bond with your children. And it was one of the first times I had heard that when I heard it from the doctor. And now you're bringing up the same thing. So for anybody out there, if you feel like you need a little more proof, there you go. Now you have it.
Well, and I love that this is something that you heard forever ago and haven't thought about in a while, because it's still true. Like this is not new news.
Yeah, no, exactly. And anyway, so I just thought that was a great point. Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on. So let's kind of go through the book a little bit, because the book, and as I said in the introduction, the book is set up to where, there are examples, there are things that, you feel like you're learning something, you're enjoying it, but you're also gathering information. So share a little bit about the book and why you wrote it the way that you did.
Yeah, thank you. And it's such a cool opportunity to kind of share the story of how the book came to be as well, because like for anybody that's listening that hasn't interacted with my work at all, I've written 2 books. And if you're wondering like where do I start with Hiking Your Feelings. And the reason that I say that is I self-published my first book in 2019, and I was a week into my book tour in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So for me personally, at the time when I wrote it in 2019, I was clear on the story. I was clear on the lessons I wanted to share that I had gathered from the trail. But I wasn't confident enough to write the version of the book that I've now published here this year for Hiking Your Feelings, because like I said, like I wasn't a doctor. I'm not a therapist. At the time, I didn't really believe that me experiencing something would be enough, and that I needed to have like letters after my name to be able to talk to this. And that's not true. So first and foremost, for anybody listening, your lived experience is yours and you're free to share about it and glean the lessons from it whenever you feel like it and whenever you're ready to start. So don't underestimate your own potential to heal yourself and understand yourself because you don't have a white lab coat or a couch that people sit on. So that version of the story, the first version, is just my story straight through. I didn't want to go for a literary agent. I didn't want any rejection because I had rejected myself and my own story for decades. And I just wanted to write it. So this book is the book that I wish I wrote in 2019, and it's here and it's on time and I love it. So we're following the story of the 2 hikes I did on Catalina Island. So from a timing perspective, we're looking at the years that led up to these trips, just to give some context and a frame for what had I endured and what did I need to move through. And in 2016 was the first hike, and 2018 was the second hike, and that's kind of the time window that we're discussing my story.
Right.
And so we use my story, my very personal experience on the Trans Catalina Trail to illustrate the concepts that we've been teaching and the programs that we offer through our now nonprofit organization called Hiking My Feelings. So in each chapter, we start with my story. Where was I on the trail? What was I dealing with? How did I move through the things that I needed to move through? And then we take a step back and we like kind of zoom out from my very personal, very specific experience in a section called Trail of Life. And in the Trail of Life section of each chapter, we're zooming out and we're just talking about like, what is the theme that I'm moving through here? So each chapter has its own theme. Chapter 1, grief and loss. We also talk about body image. We talk about relationships. We talk about career stress. Like we talk about everything. So Trail of Life is like zooming out so you can find your version of your story in mine. And then we have a section called Mindful Miles. And Mindful Miles serves 2 purposes and 2 audiences. One, as an individual, these are prompts that you can use to reflect on your own experience. And they are the questions that I was literally asking myself as I was moving through these different topics. And they also serve as a really great way to start discussions on the trail or off. So if you're in a book club, I've already written the prompts for you.
Yeah.
If you know that you have a friend that is just really grieving after the loss of a job or a pet or a human that they love, then you can take chapter 1 and you can use those prompts as a way to discuss while you go for a hike with your friend. 1, you're getting the healing power of nature. 2, you're connecting on a deeper level. And 3, the power of self-reflection knows no end because we have to do this work for ourselves. I can't ask you, like, I can give you the prompts, but I can't answer them for you. Much like your doctor can prescribe medication, but you have to take it. They can prescribe you a nutrition plan.
Mhm.
You have to eat it. So while this work is so deeply personal, we don't have to do it alone. So Mindful Miles serves as like that front line for your own personal self-reflection, but also expands out into your community as well. And then the last section of each chapter is called Next Steps. And that is exactly what it sounds like. How can I take the next steps to heal this area of my life? And I offer a ritual or some kind of activity or things to think about, tasks, action items that you can take to take the next steps in your healing journey. So throughout all of that, we've got prompts for self-reflection. We've got physical action you can take to then
Mhm.
bring that and integrate it on the trail. And all of this from a mental health, physical health, spiritual health perspective, all of it is beneficial because you're getting that fresh air, you're getting your body moving, you're feeling seen and supported, whether that's just in your relationship to self, because you're actually asking yourself, hey, how am I doing? You're taking time with yourself instead of wearing all the hats that you wear. You're not being a dad, you're not being a mom, you're not being a partner, you're not a teacher, you're not whatever your professional roles are, you're not a parent, you're not a spouse. Like you're just you. And we don't give ourselves enough time and space to just be us without the hats that we wear and the roles that we hold. So it's a really beautiful front line, but then also the benefits of spending this kind of time in this like deep level of community and connection with the people that we care about most. Like when I do this work for myself, I show up as my best self and my most expressed self and my most confident self and my most grounded self and my most healthy self, which that inspires literally everybody that I interact with. When I am having a great day because all my needs are met,
Yep.
that carries it into every interaction that I have. And the
Absolutely.
opposite is true. When I know I'm not feeling great, but I like try to push through it and go out and get stuff done, it never goes the way I want to. And then I'm doubly disappointed because I'm like, I knew I should have listened to myself. And also this didn't work
Yep.
out. So
Mhm.
it just gives like a really beautiful framework to start a self-reflection practice, but also don't keep this healing to yourself. If it's working for you, it's going to work for your friends and family too. So share it.
Absolutely. And I love the fact when you get to the end of like each chapter, and I'm one that develops mantras. So I'll think about things and then I'll develop a mantra that fits for me. And that's what I felt that you were setting up for. It's whatever it is, individually, people will find whatever it is that works for you. But I feel like you're giving them all the tools to pick the mantra that's going to work best for you. And then I utilize that for the rest of my walk or the rest of my meditation or whatever it is. But I'll put a mantra in, and that will set me up for the rest of that day or for however long is left in that day. So again, everybody out there. So the first book was Hiking My Feelings. The new book is Hiking Your Feelings. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network.
Conflict International are experts at uncovering the truth. Our specialist team has decades of experience in providing a range of bespoke investigation and intelligence services to companies and individuals. Whether you need professional screening or background checks of employees, due diligence of potential clients or business partners, asset tracing services, or surveillance, Conflict International has a rapid response team on hand to get you to the heart of the matter. Our key strength is in our global capabilities. We can tap into an extensive network of trusted professional investigators based in most jurisdictions worldwide, enabling us to go almost anywhere a case takes us. Conflict International has decades of experience with a diverse range of skills among our team, developed from backgrounds in military and security intelligence services, as well as practiced lawyers. Visit our website today at conflictinternational.com to find out more about our services. That's conflictinternational.com. Global reach, local knowledge.
And we're back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network. We're speaking with Sydney Williams, and we're talking about hiking your feelings. So Sydney, let's talk a little bit about self-love. You talk about it a lot in the book, and I think it's probably one of the most powerful things that you go into. So share a little bit about, and maybe some of the struggles, and then how you've been able to focus on self-love through the book and through your your group now.
Yeah, thank you. It's self-love gets a bad rap, and I think the reason that it gets a bad rap is because it's been commercialized and commoditized and turned into a product that you can purchase. Granted, I'm selling a book, so that is what it is. But
Yeah.
self-love is so much deeper than bubble baths and candles and the things that we think of when we think of self-care or self-love. To love yourself is a radically transformative act. And in today's day and age where we're so just aligned to meeting other people's needs first, whether that's business or family or anything, to take time and carve out time for ourselves, to be with ourselves and by ourselves and for ourselves is radical in and of itself. To be able to carve out time to do this work is also a really deep privilege. To be able to have time to step away from whatever your other responsibilities are in life, even if it's only for a few minutes at a time per day, is still a layer of privilege that I don't think that this industry gives enough articulation to. So for me, the struggle has been, all right, I bought the bath bombs, I bought the candles, and I still don't love myself, right? I signed up for the program, I started a business. This was way before this chapter of my life. I started a business and I still don't love myself. I'm following all of the coaches and influencers and all the people that say do this, here's the formula, do this thing, then you'll love yourself, and then life is never hard again. That's not how this works. So I think when I talk about self-love and the struggle of it,
Yep.
first and foremost, we got to talk about let's break down what this actually is. It's not a movie. Life is not a rom-com. It's not, you don't get discovered, you don't get saved. To some extent, we have to save ourselves. And that's not to say from a selfish perspective. Again, we have to do this work for ourselves. And actually, it wasn't until I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes that I learned what that meant. Because you hear that and it sounds nice. You hear phrases like everything is a choice or everybody has a choice. First of all, that's kind of bypassing. We are not all born on the same foundation from which to make choices. So yes, we always have a choice, but the choices that you're presented with, Alan, are very different from the choices that I'm presented with. I live in a 1998 Chevy van that's old enough to buy beer, so I can afford to go do the work that I do. We are on the precipice of everything that we've ever wanted. And also, we aren't the well-resourced group. Like, you can do self-love at a budget. You don't have to buy all the things. You don't have to send yourself on a 10-day silent retreat to get to this place. It can be as simple as, and this is an example I give in the book, if you're going out on a hike and you'd like to give self-love and self-trust a little try, if you got to pee, go pee. How many times do we ignore our body's signals when we need to use the restroom and we're like, nah, body, you don't know what you're talking about. I'll just hold it. The second that we just allow ourselves to figure out a way to relieve ourselves physically, we were already starting to reconnect that self-trust and that mind-body connection. So the struggle for me initially was like, I followed what all the salespeople told me to buy, and I'm still not happy and I'm still not healthy because the positionality of the things that I was trying was buy this solution and then life will never be hard anymore. What I've learned in this journey, especially over the last 6 years, and I was trying to do this for like decades before, and hiking was the missing piece that clicked it all together, as I mentioned before the break. But it was in this space of, okay, I thought that I would stop learning these lessons once I learned them. And I thought, once I do the thing, then everything is fine and I will never feel pain again. I will never experience struggle again. It will be all sunshine and rainbows. And for the last 6 months, definitely since the beginning of this year, I have felt like a petulant toddler because I'm like, no, I was told I shouldn't have any more pain once I learned these skills. And what's actually happening is, and I don't have children, I'm child-free by choice, but I liken my self-love, my self-growth, my self-trust journey to contractions. So like in prior chapters of my life, I would have some kind of thing that activated me, and then it could take weeks or months or years or decades until I figured out like, what was that thing that activated me and why does that impact my life today? And as I started to pay attention to these things and started to understand the signals that I'm getting from my body and like actually feel my feelings instead of numbing them, then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, it's not that I'll never ever experience struggle or doubt again. It's that now those contractions are getting shorter. So now I'm so in tune with my body that if my needs are met and I'm regulated before something comes at me, I can identify the feeling in my body before it takes over my whole life. So the struggle of moving out of like a commercialized capitalistic view of self-love and into a journey that works really well for you is the mechanism here. And to the point that you made before the break, you were saying about how this offers a lot of resources and there's so many different activities you can do and how you set personal mantras. I love that. And I love that you find that inspiration from here. And one of the mechanisms that was kind of holding me back from expressing my work in this way was like, I don't want to tell people what to think. I want to encourage them to think differently. And the way that I draw inspiration from the wilderness that surrounds me and how that mirrors what's happening in my body, mind, and spirit, that inner wilderness, outer wilderness dot connecting, that's the magic. And that's where the profound growth and healing comes from, is being able to draw that inspiration from the places that I'm experiencing and think of life through that lens rather than through the lens of my pain and my past.
I mean, first of all, I just love what you just said, and it brought so many different thoughts to my mind. One of them I think has to do, or that I got also from the book, was along the lines of self-love, was also self-appreciation. To appreciate the things that we have and to appreciate what we bring to the table, because it is going to be something different. And for some reason, I feel like through whatever forces that are out there are just focusing so much on the negative, on fear, on not trying to figure out what is the best. And I've said to my own sweetheart, and I'll say something, and I said, if I say something and if you don't quite get it and you think, wow, I could take it like this, which would be very positive, or I could take it like this and it'd be very negative. I said, always take the positive, because that's what I meant. But for some reason, I feel there's been a conditioning or something out there that if it can be taken two different ways, people will slide towards the negative, and it's affecting them in a negative way. So I'll say, assume it was the positive. And then if you're not sure, ask,
Mm.
you know, but these are the things that, again, when we're out there and again, you're hiking, you're talking, and we go on hikes together, to be able to, um, communicate on a level that, that we're making sure that that there isn't a misunderstanding and that we're not being slanted towards what seems to be society slanting towards whatever it is negative or whatever it is that should be fearful. I know that when we first got on this call, we talked about how beautiful the weather is right now. The weather is just incredible. To me, it's perfect. And yet last week there was some rain or whatever. But we live in this place where most of the time it's great. And yet I was around some friends while it was raining, and there were two issues. One was that they didn't say it was raining. They said it's pouring down rain. So they were pushing it to a negative. And then the second part was, God, I hate this. And I was like, well, actually the rain is good because we haven't gotten any in a while and stuff. And, there is a positive to so many of these things, and we shouldn't spend so much time focusing on those little negatives. So anyway, as you were speaking, these are the things that were popping into my head. And I hope that everybody out there that's listening or watching is recognizing that as Sydney's telling us these things, which you would also get from the book, it's going to make you think. And if it makes you think, you're going to start making decisions, you're going to start communicating, and it's all going to benefit all of us.
Yeah, well, and there's a couple things in your reflection of my reflections that I wanted to touch on because it's worth calling out. When we
Yeah.
talk about appreciation, I think one of the things that is the most detrimental to society, especially to women and girls, is this concept that you can't nobody else can love you unless you love yourself. And I lovingly and respectfully and forcefully call BS on that. Because it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until my relationship with my husband that I felt that I had true unconditional love mirrored back to me and I could understand how to provide that for myself. And it was at his suggestion of backpacking that I started to have this relationship with the world around me in the way that I do. And the thing that I want to call out about the appreciation side is when we're in the forest, we don't go around looking at the trees and being like, did you see that fat tree? Look at the branches on that thing. Gross. Did you see what that tree is wearing? Nasty. We don't listen to bird song and we're like, oh my God, that bird is so annoying. We're like delighted by how different the birds sound and how different the trees look. If we can take inspiration from that, and that's where stuff started to switch for me, talking about taking inspiration from our surroundings. I walk through the forest and I just appreciate the heck out of those trees. Thank you for the oxygen. Thank you for pulling the carbon out of the environment or out of the atmosphere and giving it so we can breathe it. Thank you for all the stories and all the things that you hold, you big, wise son of a gun. I love you. I do a lot of work in Sequoia National Park, and those trees are ancient and they are my friends, and I'm not kidding. The other thing that I think is interesting that you pulled out was like the positivity side of things, specifically for those of us that are in Southern California that don't know what to do with rain. Y'all, good things happen when it rains, whether you live in Seattle or you live in Southern California, Kentucky or Maine. Like, good things happen when it rains. And if you allow yourself to remember that, that's how plants grow. That's how bad things go away. They get washed away in the rain. The earth is cleansed, whatever, however you want to frame it. If we take inspiration from that and we just stop hating the rain, like that's going to be hard for a lot of us. But if we just stop feeling inconvenienced by things that we don't have control over, like the weather, and we instead are like allow ourselves to be curious and delighted by a shift in weather, specifically rain, then if we know that it's true when rain happens, good things happen, what else is like that? If that's true, what else is true? And then you can follow that positivity rabbit hole through every facet of your life and just reframe really quickly all the things that you think about negatively first. And I learned this for my skydiving career. I did not anticipate that skydiving would give me silver lining capacities and superpowers. But when I was a competitive skydiver, my first training camp, We got down from our first training jump. We watched the video, and I watched my performance on that skydive. And I was just like, I was like, I missed this. I screwed this up. I didn't perform well. And my coach was like, hold on a minute. We have a system and you are directly going against it because you're so negative automatically. What was the system? And I was like, okay, coach, I'm sorry. The system was we watch the video. We don't say anything. We pick out 2 to 3 things that went well. We pick out 2 to 3 things we'd like to improve on, and then we figure out how we can improve those. And if we don't know how to improve them, then we ask you as our coach to guide us through that. Sometimes on a skydive, the only things that were good was that I woke up, I exited the plane, and I landed safely, and I was still breathing. And the same is true for life. You don't have to go skydiving to learn that lesson. You can learn it right now. Welcome to it. Sydney's Classroom on Answers Network. You can, whenever you want to, decide to just start to look for 2 or 3 things that went well first. And it's hard because we grow up with the fear prioritized. There's a lot that we need to keep ourselves safe from. There's a lot that is being done on our behalf to protect us. It's just so much fear and so much negativity. So similar to how self-love is kind of a radical thing to do, thinking positive, especially in this day and age, is also kind of radical too. And if it starts with, well, I woke up today, I'm breathing, and as of right now, today specifically, I have all my needs met. I have a shelter, I have food, I have enough money in the bank to buy whatever I might need to buy today. Am I going to go buy a boat tomorrow? No, but that's not my priority. So when we think about that very specific to us work that we must do, if we can take inspiration from the world around us and start to appreciate the things that are naturally occurring in nature, there's no opinion about this. We're not like, wow, that giraffe, little too tall for me. Giraffes giraffe. That's what they do, right? So it's just I just want to really hone in on the fact that if you can go out and appreciate and observe instead of judge, then we can look at that from a curiosity perspective versus a judgment perspective. And life, when you're curious, is way more fun, way more warm, and way more rewarding when we're coming at it from curiosity rather than judging and reacting.
Well, first of all, I think that your book and your speech right now should be mandatory in schools.
Oh God,
if we could have this, and I would put it in. I think I'd put it in maybe about 6th, 7th grade, and go, okay. This is going to be one of the lessons that you're going to get, that you're going to take with you, and it is going to benefit you throughout life. And believe me, far more than trigonometry is. So,
still can't say I've ever used trig in my life outside of the classroom.
That's my point. All right. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about, we talked about the book, but I want to talk about Hiking My Feelings, which has grown into a community-driven platform. So for everybody, stay with us. You're listening to or watching Answers Network. Having a teenager at risk who is going through a traumatic experience can be difficult on parents, siblings, and all who are working with that young person. No family should have to go through this process alone. West Shield Adolescent Services is here to ensure you don't have to. Many of the psychologists and psychiatrists we work with have spoken about the stress families go through. Not just the young person, but the parents, needing to get their child to a program where they can get the help they need. West Shield aims to lessen that stress. Every case goes through a thorough intake process with one of our knowledgeable, compassionate intake coordinators. We want to know the likes, the dislikes, and the fears of each child. This important information is taken into consideration when choosing the best suited team member for each individual teenager. West Shield agents come from all different walks of life, giving us a diverse group of team members to ensure a personalized, compassionate experience for every teenager. This allows us to make certain every young person we work with gets to the chosen program in the best possible state of mind. We contacted over 600 of the youth we've worked with in the past to see where they're at now. 97% of these individuals told us how much their lives had improved, that they had better relationships with their friends and families, had gone on to marry, have kids, and were now using the skills they learned in their program to raise their own children. Our role of transporting at-risk teenagers is a vital step in the process of ensuring a youth's ability to thrive in their new environment, and is a role we don't take lightly. The recovery process can be a long one, but like any journey, it started with a single step. And we're back. We've been talking about Sydney's new book, which is Hiking Your Feelings. But when we went to break, I asked, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the community-driven platform now, which is Hiking My Feelings. How do you envision its future and its impact on individuals seeking personal growth and healing?
That's a great question. So Hiking My Feelings started in 2018, and it started just as a mountaintop idea. Like, I had discovered that I was hiking my feelings instead of eating or drinking them. And that framing for that opened up this container for healing, that this framing for healing that really spoke to me and felt approachable and understandable. So after my experiences on the Trans Catalina Trail, I was like, how do we replicate this? Like, the first call that I made in 2018 when we got back to cell service wasn't my friends who were curious about my progress on the trip, wasn't my family who like wanted to know I didn't die in the wilderness. It was to the Catalina Island Conservancy, because what I had discovered for myself was, over the period of those two hikes, I had two transformative experiences. And the first thing I wanted to do was figure out, how can I protect and promote these places so more people have the awareness that they exist and access to these experiences for generations to come. So it started with a speaking tour that we did in 2018 and 2019. We hosted more than 140 events that year. And I spoke at like 60 different REI stores around the United States. We hosted hikes in every place that we went. And then at the end of 2019, after I self-published my first book, we incorporated as a nonprofit organization. And we received our IRS exemption the week that the pandemic hit. So all of the things that we thought would be funding our programs were actually, all of those funds were redirected to COVID relief, as they should have been. But I was like, this is wildly inconvenient. We've been taking people outside off their devices into the wilderness. And now I got to figure out how to flip that model on its head and make everything we do in the field available virtually.
Okay.
So that was a lot.
Okay. And I have to interject in regards to that particular point. And as it turns out, with all of the knowledge that we now have after the fact, that had they just allowed everybody to be outside and do the things that you were doing, it would have been better for everybody.
1000%. So that's what was deeply frustrating. I was like, because for myself personally, before the pandemic, I completely like eradicated the capacity to have a panic attack. Like, I became so balanced and so aware and developed so many healthy coping mechanisms that panic attacks were like not a thing for me anymore. I reversed the type 2 diabetes that I was diagnosed with within a year of being diagnosed. So like, the healing power of nature is real. It's not just like some hippy dippy stuff we do out here in California. It is scientifically proven. But to that end, that was the first moment where I was like, okay, what do we want to do here? Because like, the touring model and hosting events outside was then thwarted by the pandemic. So we took everything that we planned to do through the US and Canada on that tour in 2020 that got squashed, and we condensed it into a 12-week program called Blaze Your Own Trail to Self-Love. Absolutely lovely. All kinds of workshops, building resilience, encouraging people now during the pandemic, like, go out for a hike by yourself. So lame, but get outside. And so that like bridged the gap between where we were and where we wanted to be, and accommodating for the way that our business had changed as a result of the pandemic. Now, since 2020, 2021, we've had the honor and distinct privilege of hosting events in some of our most beautiful public lands here in America. So we've been partnering with the Joshua Tree National Park Association, which is the official nonprofit arm of Joshua Tree National Park, since 2020. We developed a series of events for the Desert Institute called Wilderness Wellness, where we host our events in partnership with the Joshua Tree National Park Association. We also do work with Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park in partnership with the Sequoia Parks Conservancy. And when I think about that moment that I had on the dock in Two Harbors on Catalina Island, getting ready to board the ferry back home after that hike in 2018, and that question in my mind, like, can we replicate what just happened for me? Can I create an environment that mimics what I had, the support I had from my husband, from myself, the resources, and also the nature that's holding me through these experiences? And what we've done in Sequoia National Park this will be our third season now, is exactly that. So it's taking 3 organizations that are doing really profound work and getting out of our silos and coming together in collaboration. So we're working with the Volunteers and Parks Department at Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park, which is a function of the National Park Service. We also work with the Sequoia Parks Conservancy, which is the official nonprofit partner from a philanthropic and educational perspective at Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park. And then Hiking My Feelings, as our nonprofit, we bring in our programming. So the way that our work is expressed now is the most creative work I've ever done. It's the most aligned I've ever felt, and it's by far the most impactful. And the way that we do this is the Volunteers and Parks Department assigns my group a conservation project. So for the last 3 years, we've been supporting a meadow restoration in Sequoia National Park, where back between Indigenous days and National Park Service officially designated the boundaries of that park, there was cattle grazing in the early 1900s, late 1800s. And at some point along the way, a species of grass came and just infiltrated this meadow. They've been working on this meadow restoration for 7 years, which is already a beautiful metaphor to say, you don't just come to one retreat, you don't just listen to one podcast, you don't read one book, and then everything's fine forever. It's a continual tending to. And so what we do, and the reason why this is so profound is, one, for me, it's not enough to go to a place and experience healing. If I say that I have a relationship with the outdoors, relationships ideally are both parties bringing 100% together. But say it's 50-50, whatever the division is, when was the last time I gave back to the places that helped me heal? So we tie in this conservation project, and I develop a program that mirrors what we're doing in the field to connect the dots between inner and outer wilderness. So as it pertains to Sequoia and our meadow restoration, we're removing an invasive species of grass. So I teach about invasive thoughts and limiting beliefs. And when we do that, we're able to connect these dots so profoundly that people are not only giving back to the park, but they're giving back to themselves. And when we have a deeper connection to place, then we want to protect it and we want to share it. So what we've seen is increased creativity, increased productivity, increased resiliency, increased emotional awareness, a deep connection to self, community, and planet. And it is by far the most profound work that we do. And we're really excited to be expanding that into other areas this year and beyond.
Now, and unfortunately, we've run out of time, but where can people get more information if people want to get involved at some level? What's the website, or what is the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Hikingmyfeelings.org.
Okay, there you go, everybody. Hikingmyfeelings.org. There is a comment that came. I just want to read this comment before we sign off. And this one says, as a mom of 4 children between 11 and 17 years old, I can say that moving from the city to a more rural area was one of the best decisions my husband and I made for our family. Instead of hanging out on the streets and getting into drugs and trouble, as our 2 oldest did before we moved, they enjoy exploring the woods right out our backyard. I believe that we are all happier and healthier as a family in this environment. This is from Samantha in Helena, Montana. So, Samantha, thank you for sharing that with us. Sydney, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for everything that you're doing. In the next time that you have an event coming up, please let me know if I can share it on the line. If I can help get it out to more people, I would love to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Alan. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
All right. And for everybody out there, please visit our archives of past interviews. You can do it at answers.network, or you can just subscribe to the show through whatever podcast you listen to or whatever platform you listen to. So for everybody out there, just be good human beings and be with us again next week on Answers Network.
You're listening to Answers Network with Alan Cardoza, only on LA Talk Radio.